Hi everyone, this is Alex for FNC Poker, and for this video I decided to come up with what I think are the top 5 leaks that keep players stuck at low stakes. Before we get into the actual leaks and hand examples, I would like to let you know that we run a small CFP that is actually designed to help people that struggle with these leaks move up in stakes, and we are also going to launch our first bootcamp. So if you're curious about that, like and subscribe this video and join our Discord community for more details. So the leak that is number 5 on our list is going to be quite underrated by a lot of people, and I think I'm also not really doing it justice by placing it on number 5, but you know, it's more about listing the leaks than a competition. So number 5 is having a bad mental game. To illustrate this, I'm going to show you a hand I played, unfortunately not that long ago. I was a bit rusty in this session, and although for some of you might seem like a hand that is played pretty standard, and actually if you look in a solver it will also say it's played pretty standard, I think in reality I played it quite bad, and I will explain why. So we see this regular on the button. This is actually a player I've played against quite a few times. I do have some reads on him. Basically, I know that he's quite neaty and quite passive, you know, the kind of rakeback grinder ABC player, not really getting out of line. So he ISOs, we make a relatively big squeeze, and he calls. Now again, knowing that he's quite tight, I think his range here might be a bit tighter than other players, especially considering this is GG. Rake is high and the player is quite tight, the squeeze is quite big. So we see a flop of Queen 6 deuce. Here on a queen high board, especially from the big blind where our range is a bit more polar, we shouldn't really range bet. I mean, we could overstretch if we think they overfold, but yeah, I think just mixing is probably a bit better considering they have all the top pair, top kicker combos. We go for a quarter. I would actually like to see a 40% size. When I mix, I would usually use this for range bets most often. But yeah, this is not the end of the world or anything. We could also use a more polar strategy. He calls, turn is a deuce, and we decide to go for another big bet. Again, he's going to have a bunch of under pairs here, 6x, that are still probably going to call, flash draws. So yes, we are beat by ace queen. Even against a passive player though, in these later positions, this is strong enough to bet. He calls, and river is a king. So at this point, we see the SPR is very, very low. We have half pot left behind. Maybe pause this video, think for yourself what you would do. In game, I thought, okay, it's quite unlikely to get value from worse. If we bet here, we might get called by king queen, but knowing that our opponent is quite neaty already, I don't think there's a lot of worse hands that they're going to call, even though in theory there should be some hands. If we check, I was thinking, okay, do we check call, do we check fold? We did end up checking, and he shoves. And in game, I was thinking, okay, we split with enough king queen. In practice, I think we actually block a lot of those combos, especially if he's tight enough to not call the offsuit combos pre-flop. So yeah, that will be a problem. And in game, I was also thinking he might have 4-5 or something. But again, it's a big squeeze. He shouldn't even call that hand. And then on such a texture, it should, if it's not a combo draw, it would probably fold by the turn, and then he should also call some under pairs and 6x on the turn that should be turned into a bluff on the river. But what we know about these more passive opponents is that they will really massively underbluff where there aren't any intuitive bluffs available. So I think it's very unlikely that this player will first of all call the turn with enough worse pairs and then shove the river with that. So even though it might seem neaty, I think in this particular situation against this particular opponent who I actually have quite a lot of reads against, we should find a tight fold, which we don't. And we are beat by aces, which are apparently a call in GTO Wizards ranges. And yeah, I've started seeing it way more often. So especially if he has aces in his range, this makes it even worse. And yeah, again, if you look in the solver, it will tell you definitely call this hand, it's an EV loss not to do so. And that's why I don't think it's a punt or anything, but what I'm trying to illustrate here is that if I was playing my A game and I wasn't trusty and I wasn't maybe driven by emotion a bit too much, I would have not made this call and I would have made a great exploit based on my opponent. In our CFP and also in our bootcamp, we will address this side of the game as well. I'm a mental game coach, so yeah, we are also trying to focus on, improving focus at the tables, getting better routines, and helping you make the correct decisions for longer periods all the times, and stop making those mistakes that you just look at the hands after and you're like, oh, why would I ever click that? Yeah, we want. Okay, let's go to number 4, which again maybe should be higher, very disputable, but this is about playing bad against recreationals. And I need to warn you, this is going to be quite unorthodox hand. You might be very surprised by what's happening here. I actually posted this hand on Reddit and people said we are both not very nice words. Okay, so we 3-bet here. We need to know that button was a huge whale. Don't cancel me for saying that. Yeah, he was just getting huge stacks in almost every hand. He was bluffing with complete air after calling twice for 5x spots. So a very unusual player and a player we all want to have at our table. The problem is it's very tricky sometimes to play against these guys, and we need to, have the courage to get it in quite thinly. So we squeeze. Considering how wide he was, I think I would have liked making it even bigger, like 15, 16, even 17 big blinds. I don't actually think he was folding almost anything pre-flop. And the way he was playing is every time we were checking to him, he was just putting these huge bets in. So in this spot where, again, it's quite a difficult one in a way, because we know he's going to be very wide and very aggressive with all the trash in his range. But we are also very deep and all we have is ace high. I don't expect to ever get better to fold. I don't think at this SPR this can be a value bet either, so I guess the best option is to check and decide. And our friend goes 2x spot on the flop. And again, this is quite a tough position. I don't think we can fold. I think we are ahead very frequently. In a previous hand, he just did a similar thing with king 10. But on the other hand, our hand needs protection. It's not like we are super happy calling down 3 streets, even though if we check all, we should. So again, check shoving is also an option. We might get some worse hands to call, like 4-5, 9-7, even 9-10. A lot of gut shots. Maybe you don't believe that, but this villain was really crazy. And we also get protection from some random hands that still have some equity against us, like Queen Jack. It's quite good for us if we make that fold. So we decide to go for a check shove, as crazy as it seems. And he calls with Jack 7. Again, this is not a play I would recommend you do against most people that just do this thing on the flop deep stack. But what I advise you to do is, just observe what your opponents are doing and have the courage to make big adjustments. Because if you end up playing against this person and you just 3-bet ace king and check fold the flop, that would be quite detrimental to your win rate. So be able to adjust and learn how to play against recreationals. This is another point we are insisting a lot in our training, both in our CFP and the bootcamp that's going to come. Okay, 3 more to go, and on number 3 we have another leak that I would say is very underrated, and that is the fact that you probably don't analyze enough small hands. I've seen this with my students, I've seen this on forums, I've seen this on different Discord groups. People just post hands where they lost a stack or they won a stack or, I don't know, big bluff catches on the river or stuff like that. But it's very rarely when they ask themselves, oh, should I c-bet here? Should I probe the turn here? And then they don't really mark those hands in game either. And the problem with this is, if you think about your poker career, about your game, these are actually going to be the most frequent spots that you're going to find yourself in. So yes, you're not going to win or lose a stack, but you're going to find yourself in that spot maybe, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 times per day, depending on the spot. And if you just lose a little bit, a little bit, a little bit every time, that will compound and affect your win rate. So my advice is, if you're not sure of what you're supposed to do in a spot, just look over that hand, because there's a lot of things that you might find out and you can improve on it. An example of a hand like this is the following, where button opens 2.5x, I call from the big blind, and the board is 9-7-6 flush draw. It goes check check, and the turn is another 9. So at this point I was wondering, okay, am I supposed to actually probe turn here? In game I was thinking, well, we have to overcard, so if he calls we can improve sometimes. We block some 9x with the queen and the jack, as he's going to have queen 9 offsuit and jack 9 offsuit and suited, and he's probably going to be a bit more capped in practice than in theory when he checks back. So I decided to go for a bet. Again, I wasn't entirely sure about this. He calls and river is a jack. At this point I was thinking, okay, he might have a lot of 8x, a lot of 10x that are going to miss here, and he might think, okay, the jack is a good card for him, so he might actually end up bluffing. Also, of course, we can get value from worse, so I thought this hand is going to be a mix. I roll a check, and yeah, I decide to check. He checks back, and he shows up with ace-8. That didn't bluff. I don't think this hand is supposed to bluff. And again, doesn't seem like a terrible play, doesn't look like, wow, a very interesting hand. But actually, I saw that this hand is a pure check on the turn, and then if we no luck and we end up betting it on the turn, then it is a pure bet on the river. So both turn and river were, at least from a theoretical point of view, played badly. And okay, I need to ask myself, why is that? So first of all, on the turn we should bet quite thin for value and very, very wide. But if you think about our range, everything is a gut shot. So 5 is a gut shot, and 8 is a gut shot, 10 is a gut shot. We have flush draws. We're going to have 7x, 6x that can be bet for value. We're going to have 9x. So because of so many draws in our range, we don't really have to go as wide as betting nothing, especially when this nothing kind of blocks his auto folds. I thought in game, okay, if we have exactly this suit, blocking the flush draw and the flop backdoor flush draw, we unblock a bit less bluffs, which are going to be hearts and clubs, but still it is too wide to bet this hand. And then what's happening on the river is that he shouldn't really have a lot of jack-x. So if he doesn't bet the flop with the jack, which a lot of jacks have some kind of backdoors, some kind of equity, not a lot of showdown value. So a lot of jack-x would bet the flop in his position, right? And then if he doesn't and we bet the turn, some of that jack-x is also going to fold the turn. So by the river, the jack-x is not that relevant. Therefore, we are allowed to value bet very thin here. So we can go 33 or 40% or a quarter with a very, very wide range. And that means when that happens, we don't really slow play much on the other hand. So this hand, very, very strong, should be a pure bet. It's not a spot where we want to slow play a lot, but we want to value bet thin, especially because a lot of his calls are going to be 7x, 6x, some ace highs that are going to be in trouble against that small bet. So yeah, what I try to highlight with this is always look over these hands, because as you can see here, I think there's a lot of concepts that you can get from just analyzing one of these small hands, concepts that you can obviously apply in your future hands, in your future games. Getting to number 2 on our list, this is going to be, you are calling based on hand strength. And what I'm trying to say with this, I will illustrate with 2 hands. So the first one, we open button and we get called by big blind. Now, big blind is a very capable, active, aggressive player, and I think this is going to be quite important for the hand in question. We decide to go for a small range bet. I think this board is good enough for us to just range bet even against someone who is a a bit more aggressive. He calls, there's a 4. At this point, we should have a bit of a more polar range. I think we can still continue betting some under pairs, but definitely ace high is not a value bet anymore, and it is also too good to bluff. I mean, he's supposed to call here stuff like Jack 10, 10, 9, even lower backdoor flush draws, 10, 7. What else? King 10. A lot of weak hands are supposed to be called here. 5, 6, whatnot. So yeah, this hand is a middling hand, no reason to bet it. The river is a 3, and he goes for a huge 2x spot bet, 2 point something x. And maybe some of you would be thinking here, oh, I have ice high, it's a huge bet, I just fold. But the reality is what we should be thinking of is actually how the ranges look like and how they interact with the board. So first of all, the ranges are very, very wide. We open button, big blind calls. Second, we know we are facing a very aggressive opponent. In fact, in the game, I had a note on him that he 2x spot air on a paired board 2 times. This is why, notes are very important, because that's actually what's happening here as well. And then even though we have a 9, which is basically not a good reason to call because we block a lot of natural bluffs like 9, 10, 9, 7, he could get here with 9, jack, king 9, etc. He just has way too many hands that can be turned into bluffs here, and not as many value hands, because some of his queen x would check raise the flop, right? And even though he does still have some queen x, it's mostly going to be suited combos. And remember, we don't need to be good all that often, so we probably need to be good here around 40-something% of the times. So even though he has some queen x, he's still going to have a lot of bluff candidates, and especially for an aggressive player, it's going to be very, very easy to overbluff this spot. So we end up calling and we win against king 10, which is obviously a nice result. By contrast, we have this other hand where we 3-bet MP against under the gun. Actually, someone's missing, so it's more like cutoff versus MP, I guess. Still, the idea here is these ranges are really, really tight. He checks, we go for a quarter range bet. Maybe in theory we shouldn't range bet these boards. In practice, I just don't think people check raise enough bluffs. And yeah, I just don't think they find enough aggression. Therefore, we can over-realize equity. So I think range betting is fine. And we face a huge check raise. Again, we were facing quite a tight villain. I'm already very unhappy to see this. But yeah, I think we can just have the same hand often enough that we need to call. Turn is a jack, and at this point I think I might even fold to a bet, but he decides to check. We check back, river is a blank, and now he goes for a shove. So maybe for some of you this would be a call here. I think this would actually be a very bad call against the passive player taking this line and betting 2x spot on the river. And the reasons for this is everything, basically everything that did not happen in the previous hand. So in the previous hand, ranges were very wide. Here, by contrast, ranges are very, very tight. Second, in the other hand, there were so many natural bluffs available because he's just calling so wide against a small c-bet. Here, he check raises the flop, which is already something that I don't expect people to do enough with bluffs. And then he goes for this size on the river. And the third thing is the texture. Everything in his range, especially if everything that goes for a check raise on the flop, connects with this board, and it's very, very hard to find natural bluffs. And then if you look at our hand, ace king here might look good for some of you, might be thinking, we have top pair, top kicker, but in reality this is just a bluff catcher, because our opponent is never betting worse for value. So if he's never betting worse for value, then we have to think, in theory, if we were playing against a solver, we would think of blockers, but in practice, so in theory, a bluff catcher would be 0 EV, right? Because our opponent will be perfectly balanced. In practice, if our opponent isn't perfectly balanced and instead of playing balanced has too much value, then our bluff catchers become really negative EV. Therefore, calling them would be quite a big mistake. And yeah, I think this call here would burn money. So therefore, just to highlight, don't call based on your hand strength, call based on what you know the ranges are, the way they interact with the board, and opponents' tendencies. If you want to find out more about this, join our training programs. We're going to teach you how to exploit rags, and we're going to give you insights about the spots that are underbluffed and overbluffed against regulars. And finally, number one, what everyone has been waiting for, and I think maybe what a lot of you could have predicted. A lot of people are stuck in low stakes because they don't find the spots where they should apply pressure, they don't find enough aggression, and they are afraid to put their stacks in spots where it's profitable to do so. So to illustrate this, let's go through another hand. We open small blind, villain calls on the big blind. We go for a range bet on queen, queen 9. Very good board for us. And we face a raise. Again, big blind should find some raises here. Not a huge frequency as the queen, paired queen is much better for us. But he should have some raises. He's going to have some flush draws here. He's going to have some straight draws. But yeah, this hand is way too strong to fold, so we pure call it. Turn brings the flush, which we're not extremely pleased to see. We check, and he goes for another small bet. I think at this point, we still have to mostly call this hand against such a small size. I mean, there's still a lot of gut shots plus backdoor flush draws that he can have. He might even do some weird mergey plays, so we definitely prefer having a spade, but against this size I think we still have to call. And remember, we also block some queen 9, which would be his strongest hands, and 9s, even though they should be 3-bet at a decent frequency pre-flop, he can still have some. So we call, and the turn is a jack. We don't donk, although we might have some extra. Ace-X of spades, not sure about that. We check, and he bets half pot. Now, at this point, I think most of you would just fold here, but we need to think about the fact that we are going to have hands that want to check shove for value here, such as queen jack, such as queen 9, such as 9s, maybe ace-x of spades, although that's disputable. But the idea is if we have some value, we're also going to need to find some bluffs, again, at least in theory. In practice, when we want to think, okay, is this pot going to be massively overcalled by any chance? Because in that case, we don't need to find those bluffs. But here, I think what's happening is actually the contrary. Our opponent, yes, he raised, but then he goes for two very small bets, which I think are not characteristic of a good player and are actually very, very face up. And then if we think of our hand, this is probably one of the weakest hand we get here with. And then it has really good properties for bluffing because it blocks something like, I don't know, king 10, for example. I don't think that would call. Maybe it would with a 10 sometimes if the opponent is a recreational. But most importantly, it blocks queen 9 and 9s, which are his strongest value hands here, and which are also the hands that we'd want to show for value. And it doesn't have a spade, because remember how the hand went, a lot of our hands are going to have a spade. And also our opponent showing weakness, I don't think he's going to call here a king high flash, 10 high flash. Some neater opponents would even hesitate to call an ace high flash. And yeah, they would probably bet those for a bigger size anyway. So because of that, I think this is a very good spot to check shove. We do get the fold, but even if we didn't, I still think this is quite a good play. And a play a lot of people that are stuck in low stakes won't find. Now, don't get me wrong, I definitely don't advocate for you to start monkey check shoving every river against a triple barrel. That would be a punt. What I'm trying to advocate is, when you have a weak hand, maybe think twice about how the action went. Maybe think twice, is he kept here? What is my fold equity? What better bluffs can I have? Is this a sport worth bluffing in, instead of going autopilot fold? And that might help you increase your win rate. If you want to learn more on how to do that, I'll say it again, check out our Discord community, where we are going to post details about our CFP and our bootcamp, and register to those to, unplug all these leaks. Okay, this was everything for today. If you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments what other things you'd like to see in this top 5 series. See you in the next videos.